Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 212, cover dated December 1986. So stunning, iconic, memorable cover here by Barry Windsor-Smith, featuring Wolverine with his costume ripped up and blood spatter in the background, and a simple caption: Wolverine versus Sabretooth, round one. So let's open this one up. And we have not quite a splash here, more like a half splash really, establishing our setting a mile beneath Manhattan, the Morlock tunnels, where they've all been massacred by the Marauders in the previous issue. And we have Wolverine on his mission, which Storm ordered him on, which is to find a Marauder to question, and he's under no compunction to leave any of the rest of them alive. So, title of the story: The Last Run. And the creative team: Chris Claremont, writer as ever, Rick Leonardi, guest artist. So this is Rick Leonardi's second stint as guest artist on the title. His first one was Uncanny X-Men 201. So here he is again, back almost a year later. Dan Green, inker, Glynis Oliver, colorist, and Tom Orzechowski, letterer. So let's continue with the issue. So Wolverine here, examining one of the victims, her locket there, and then he hears rats coming to feast on the corpses, and he frightens them off, but he realizes, it's a wasted effort. They're just doing what comes naturally. As soon as I'm gone, they'll be back. And then he's interrupted by Psylocke, who has been asked by Storm to mind link with Wolverine to send back a report, and Psylocke tells Wolverine that she's terribly worried about Storm, but he retorts, "Don't be. You're a stranger, girl," he says to her, because Psylocke has just recently joined the X-Men team. You've only just met the X-Men. Speak up when you know what you're talking about. Storm's tough. She'll do fine. I gotta go, girl. I got work to do. I'll be in touch, as he stalks off down the tunnel, having closed the eyes of this dead Morlock. And then we pick up with Betsy back at the X-Mansion, taking off the Cerebro helmet. She thinks she's exhausted, and her poor skull is pounding fit to burst. There's a sonic barrier field surrounding the Morlock tunnels, so that's what is the reason for the extra effort. And then the scene switches to the infirmary at the X-Mansion, and we've got Moira McTaggart. So in the previous issue, Ileana thought about porting Moira to the X-Mansion, and she's done that in the interim period. And so we've got Moira and Sharon Friedlander attending to various victims of the Marauders' assault. We've got Magneto here in costume, and we've got Storm standing off to the side, and Callisto too. And what we have here, this is interesting because Storm is not given any dialogue or thought balloons, as the other characters are active and busy behind her. And then she makes her way over to Nightcrawler, who was severely injured by Riptide in the previous issue, and that compounding injuries already received in the battle against Nimrod. And so she looks over a comatose Nightcrawler and is deeply moved by his situation. She wants him to speak, to smile, but there's no response because of the seriousness of his condition. And then we pick up with Kitty, and Kitty has lost the ability to become solid, and there's no improvement. And all of this just gets to be too much for Storm, and in particular also reflecting on Colossus's anger, because Colossus says, asks her rhetorically, "Who are those butchers, Storm? Why did they do this?" And she says, "Wolverine will find out." And he replies, "I live for that moment, to find them and crush them, as I did Riptide, the one who struck down Nightcrawler." And she thinks, as she sees her reflection with her tattered costume in the glass of Kitty's containment unit. Peter was ever the gentlest of souls, and he was indeed, going all the way back to Giant Size X-Men #1. Yet now he dreams of vengeance. And I, who swore never to kill, I led the X-Men to this. So she has a little crisis of faith, and she runs out of the infirmary, right out of the mansion, into the woods behind the mansion, and right up to a cliff over the lake, Breakstone Lake, and she dives off the cliff's edge into the lake. And I like the colours here that Glynis Oliver has used in order to denote the nighttime setting for this. It's nicely done. And let's continue with the issue. So she dives into the lake, and we pick up back at the X-Mansion with Psylocke, who witnesses Colossus collapsing. And then we go back to the entrance to the Morlock tunnels with Tom Corsi on guard with a big machine gun there. And he's in dialogue with Rogue, asking whether the Marauders will hit them. And that's why they're standing guard at the entrance to the tunnel. And then Psylocke summons them to Colossus. And Rogue flies in and arrives, and she thinks about absorbing his power. But Psylocke says no, that will kill him for certain. So, because actually Colossus had collapsed on Psylocke, so she was unable to get up without the help of Rogue. And then everyone else arrives, including Magneto there and Dr. McTaggart. And then we switch back to Wolverine in Morlock Alley. This is a great page from Leonardi and Dan Green here. And the colouring from Glynis Oliver, it really works well. The whole mix works really well. And here we're getting to one of the most remarkable aspects of this particular issue. It's the first meeting, if you can believe it, of Sabretooth and Wolverine. So Wolverine here is once again picks up the sense of X-Factor. And in particular, as he thinks here, a female scent, I know as well as I do my own, but that can't be. So that's the scent of Jean Grey. And of course, the X-Men don't know about Jean's rebirth from the cocoon in Jamaica Bay. And as he thinks here, it's got to be a mistake, but he's distracted and he's slashed from behind and punched or knocked straight into a wall of the tunnel. So who is it? Who's responsible for this? Oh, well, Claremont's going to hold that one back for another few pages. We go back to Breakstone Lake, the lake on as part of Professor X's domain. And Storm emerging physically depleted from her swim. And she wants to be finished with leading the X-Men. Here she is, tearing off her clothes and running naked into the woods. And then we go back to the mansion, and we've got Colossus here being examined. And it turns out that Riptide did him some damage in the previous issue. And he is losing energy through his organic steel body. This is something that Magneto uses his powers to diagnose. And then he attempts to use his powers again to heal Colossus. So we're told here in the narrative captions that Magneto draws strength from the Earth's magnetic field until he's filled to overflowing, simultaneously refining his perceptions until he can make out the shape and structure of every molecule, every individual atom in Colossus's body. When he's ready, he releases the energy pent up within him, letting it flow like a gentle wave through the young Russian, pausing at each locus of disruption to restore the broken pattern, realign the bionic matrices, his power as inexorable as the ocean, until all the damage is swept away. So, and we've got this indication of the work going on by breaking up this anchor image into 4 vertical panels. So nice little device of storytelling there by Leonardi. And then it looks like Colossus is healed, and we have Orzakowski's sound effect here, creak, as he's moving his neck, but then he discovers something wrong. He can't move. So he's paralyzed, as it turns out. And Magneto here, terribly disappointed. I couldn't have made a mistake. I was so careful. I tried so hard. How could this have happened? He's baffled. And now we go back to the Morlock tunnels. And this, the first encounter between Sabretooth and Wolverine. So Sabretooth created way back in 1977, almost 10 years earlier, by Chris Claremont and John Byrne. And John Byrne has revealed in interviews that his design for Sabretooth's face, which we'll see maybe better on another page, that was his design for Wolverine's face without a mask. But then it got used on this independent character, Iron Fist number 14, back in 1977. But up to this point, the characters had never met before. And in this issue, it is established that they have a history. So Wolverine thinks here, I know that voice, figured he'd be here. Massacres are his stock in trade. And so Sabretooth had been shown in X Factor number 10, Louise Simonson's and Walt Simonson's X Factor number 10, to be one of the Marauders. So here he is now showing up for the very first time in the main title, X-Men. And we get, again, as I said, like this indication of a past relationship between them, that they're arch enemies, in fact. Wolverine responds to him here, glad to see you too, Sabretooth. Been a while. That old man, Sabretooth's prisoner, it's the Morlock Healer. So he continues, he endeavors to distract and goad Sabretooth, because obviously the Morlock Healer would be exactly what they need back at the X-Mansion. And this is something else to make a point of here. Let me move on to the next page, because there's some interesting bits of dialogue here. So yeah, we get a good look at Sabretooth's face in this particular panel. And we also learn the name of the Marauders' boss, Mr. Sinister. And Sabretooth says, Mr. Sinister's dealing a game that don't allow for wild cards like the Morlocks or UX chumps either. So he sent the Marauders to resolve the situation, because we're the very best there is at what we do. Like you used to be, he mocks Wolverine. Could have chopped you smooth as sin while you were dreaming, bub, he says. But where's the sport in that? When I kill you, Logan, old son, I want you to see it coming. So then Wolverine pops his claws, crouches, and gets ready to spring. But here, this phrase here, his form of address, Logan, old son, this also is a little hint from Claremont about plans he and Byrne had regarding Sabretooth before Byrne left the X-Men to go do Fantastic Four. And that is that Sabretooth is Wolverine's father. So Claremont would drop hints about that all the way to the end of his original run of the X-Men comics. And then we go back to Breakstone Lake, and we've got Callisto and Rogue tracking Storm, and they find her costume and the vest, that the leather vest that Storm won from Callisto when she fought her back in the Morlock tunnels for leadership of the Morlocks, all the way back in Uncanny X-Men 169, 170. And so Callisto goes to wearing the vest. You see her here wearing the vest to face off against Storm. And Storm has put on this civilian dress here while the wind is blowing. Really beautiful art here by Leonardi and Dan Green. Really nice stuff on this particular page. And again, very nicely complemented by Glynis Oliver's palette of colours to indicate the nighttime setting of this scene. So Callisto here facing off against a really shook Storm. She asks to be let go. She doesn't want to fight, but Callisto punches her in the jaw, grabs her by the throat, and tells her, we've all been hurt and things will probably get a whole lot worse before it's over. Life for Morlocks and X-Men both will never be the same, but no way will I abandon the ones who are left. And Storm just insists she's got nothing left. Remember, she doesn't even have her powers. So she runs off with Callisto running after her. And Callisto argues, saying, they're my people like the X-Men are yours. They put their trust in us. That makes us obliged to be true to them in return, no matter what. Again, great art on these pages with the delineation of the waterfall here. And Callisto calls after Storm, you can run from me, Storm, but what about from yourself? And then they fight. And Callisto says, you lost the... she says, Storm says to her, my life is my own. I will live it as I please. And Callisto demurs, you lost the privilege same as I did the day you donned this vest. The leather vest of leadership. And then we go back to the tunnels and the ongoing brawl between Wolverine and Sabretooth. And Sabretooth goads Wolverine, love the taste of blood, boy, especially yours. And again, that language insinuating their relationship. Remember, Wolverine not fully cognizant of his past, but Sabretooth knowing the nature of their relationship. Sabretooth says to him, you're fast, I'm faster, you're strong, I'm stronger, you kill, I'm a killer. Your fancy claws can't cut what they can't hit. And your hotsy-totsy healing factor won't save you when I rip out your heart. An interesting callback here in these horizontal panels to Uncanny X-Men 205, Barry Windsor-Smith's issues. So clearly Leonardi had looked at those and impressed by them. So we're seeing him borrowing that device of the horizontal panels to show and choreograph the fight. And finally, Wolverine retorts, cute, as he hops over Sabretooth, but no cigar. And he brings down the walls of the tunnel on top of Sabretooth. He's bringing down the house, as he says here. Tunnel was weak, figured it wouldn't take much to collapse it. We ain't finished, boy, you and me, not by a long shot. Maybe not, says Wolverine, but this fight is. And then he says, by the time you dig through or find a way around, we'll be long gone and safe. You were right, Sabretooth. You're the killer. I'm a man who sometimes kills, and that's the difference between them. Wolverine, if he kills for very good reasons and never to murder. And he continues here, we're too evenly matched. We could have fought till doomsday with neither of us winning. In younger days, I'd have given that a shot for the fun, just like Sabretooth. Road was easier then, but that's past. I've changed. I've learned about honor, as he carries the healer through the tunnels to the X-Mansion. A hard road more often than not, but worth the effort. And that's the question for Storm, you know. It's a question of obligation, duty, honor, and will she come around to believing that herself, despite her trauma at seeing the injuries done to her teammates. She says here, I've no right to lead the X-Men, but Callisto says, you have no right not to. That is to say, you're obliged. You punk out. If you rabbit, what's that to say? Colossus and Nightcrawler and Shadowcat, the ones who died and the ones still hanging on. If the X-Men, if the Dream, they and Xavier's school and body aren't worth fighting for, why the blazes did they shed their blood? That's a debt that can't be welched on. And Callisto then hands the vest of leadership back to Storm. And she says, I've come to respect you, Ororo, and I mean to see you worthy of that respect and of yourself. And so it looks like Storm has gotten through her crisis of faith, and she's going to continue leading the X-Men despite the dire experiences they've had. And then our final page, Wolverine arrives out of the Morlock tunnels at the X-Mansion to be greeted by Rogue and Tom Corsi, who are guarding the entrance, and they bring the Morlock Healer in. But just at this point, there's a blast in the tunnel, an energy wave, as Rogue says, felt the atmospheric overpressure a split second before it hit. So who or what was that? It was Thor, in his own title, issue 473, using his power over the lightning to give all the Morlocks dead in the tunnels a Viking burial, to burn up their bodies. And as Wolverine says, tunnels scoured clean. For as far as the eye can see, says Rogue. And she thinks of the New Mutants because Wolverine scented the New Mutants in the tunnels just before he arrived at the X-Mansion. And he says, we're 40 miles from Manhattan. This heat pulse reached us, so it stands to reason it filled the entire Morlock tunnel as well. If the New Mutants were anywhere inside when it hit, they're dead. But to see what happened to the New Mutants, one would have to pick up New Mutants 47, where they're not dead, where Illyana ported them to Limbo and then elsewhere afterwards. So our next issue information is Sabretooth prowling the Morlock tunnels, angry and eager for the next fight. And also, in a night worse than Nightmare, this story answers the question, is Psylocke an X-Man or not? So all of that coming up in the next issue. So I do hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please like the video. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.